Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Welcome everybody to the live. I'm pumped to be here. I'm pumped to be here, guys. Live and well. Let's make sure we have everything ready to go. Hello, Jean. Welcome to the chat. I hope you're doing well. Okay, I need to go to... All right. Let's get rolling. Hey guys, welcome the way. Welcome. Turn on. Did you... I'm going live a little bit later because I had to finish editing. I did a reaction to some Instagram reels, Christian Instagram reels or TikTok videos with my wife, and that will be posted tomorrow. I'm super excited about that. So be ready and on the lookout. Hello, Michael. Here we go. All right. So, guys. Yeah, I won't be too long. So Ruslan presses Alex O'Connor on the idea of trying out Jesus, kind of in that way. And his answer might shock you. So let's get right into it. Shout out to Ruslan and Alex O'Connor. Both love them and praying for them both. Let's get into it. Let's get into it. I need to...
But
him kicking in many respects, but
okay. Non-resistant
is a different thing, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So non-resistant, you are combative, obviously within this entire back and forth about the West stuff, but non-resistant, non-believer. And it, again, in that conversation with Ion Hershiali, like it really did seem like, it almost seems like you want to believe, you wish it were true. Is that fair language to ascribe to you?
I think that's true of the New Testament. I think that's true of the person of Jesus and his historical significance as the Son of God. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. I don't know. I don't think that's true of the Hebrew Bible. I'm not sure that's true of some of the later additions to the Christian doctrine.
Okay. So let me present this theory to you, and you tell me if you like it, you could hate it. Mm-hmm. So when I think of faith, right? Like I don't think faith as something that is necessarily binary. I don't think as faith is certain.
I think it's interesting how he likes Jesus. He wishes Jesus was true, but not necessarily the God of the Old Testament. Mostly because he thinks, yeah, God endorses slavery and God endorses genocide. I still don't get that in the Bible, in the Old Testament. I don't, reading that, you don't see. There's things in the Bible like that. That doesn't mean God endorses it. But let's continue. Let's listen to Ruslan give this very interesting example.
When I think of faith as trust or confidence in, right? And so if I'm looking for something that I want, I have to have a degree of confidence in it and then apply it. Meaning that Jesus said, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can say this mountain move, right? And so if I'm looking at something that I want to accomplish, I want to get into more physically better shape. I want to get shredded, right? And my friend who's in good shape, he's a trainer, he's telling me, hey, Ruslan, like, you got to cut out the processed food. You got to eat more chicken, got to eat more broccoli, right? You got to eat, and you got to go strength training to do these things. Now, that on the surface sounds like a terrible idea. I got to eat more broccoli. I got to eat more chicken. I got to lift heavy things. I got to do hard. None of this sounds fun. But I have enough faith, Alex. I got just enough faith that, well, you know what? He has the abs and he has the physique, and it seems like he's gotten the results that I want. So my little bit of faith, I start applying the information that I have available to me, eating the chicken, eating the broccoli, doing my compound lifts, overhead press, bench press, pull up, deadlift, squat, and I start programming. I start programming my workout. And then all of a sudden what happens is I do that long enough. Some people do 75 hard, other people commit to a very long time. And then in hindsight, I look back and 6 months later, 12 months later, 3 months later, all of a sudden, Alex, I have abs. All of a sudden, there's a physical transformation that's happened to my body, and I'm pumped. I'm like, man, this is great. So now I'm on the other side of it. I had enough faith to say, I think there's something to this. He seems to have what I want. It seems to make sense on paper, but I'm not sure because chicken and broccoli and lifting sounds terrible. And I walk through the process. Now I'm on the other side of the process, and I've applied the process. And I've done this multiple times. I've done the transformation thing. And as I'm looking back in hindsight, that is where the certainty comes in for me.
Okay. I kind of like this metaphor because obviously for me, it makes a lot of sense because I love exercising. I'm doing it every day. I'm waking up. As soon as I wake up, I go to the gym. After that, I read the Bible and pray. It gets me ready for the day. I feel just awful or weird if I don't get steps in, if I don't exercise. And even for me, I like to count calories because I know if I stick to a certain amount of calories and stay underneath the amount of calories that I use, then I'm not going to gain weight. And for the same thing, I guess, with faith in Christianity, maybe you just don't know what it's like until you try it. I guess that's what he's trying to say. But I think what he's trying to get at is you never know until you try. Or there's Christian. Okay, this is what I think Ruslan is trying to say. There's Christians, you see the amazing benefits of a Christian who decided to repent, surrender their life to Jesus, and the amazing transformation. They were once living this way of life, completely living in debauchery or sin or just not fulfilled and seemingly purposeless. And then after living for Jesus and having the result of spending time with him and allowing God to transform their life, and you see the benefits and they're like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. But for someone who hasn't experienced the love of Jesus or experienced Christ's transformation in their life, then they're never going to know. So I think that's what he's trying to get at. But then you might be surprised at Alex's response here.
There's nothing no one can tell me that's going to be contrary. Even if you gave me the best pitch for veganism, I'm going to be like, bro, chicken and broccoli works. I know it works.
Sure.
I know it works. I've applied it. I've lived it. I've did the bench press. I've did the squat. I've did the programming. It works. I got the results. And I know how to walk through this process and to get the said results based on the little bit of confidence that I had that what my friend was telling me was true and not a lie. Now, I'm not trying to parallel this to salvation in Jesus. I'm not trying to say that this is about the gospel. I'm just presenting you an idea that if you want to believe, have you ever thought about practicing as a Christian, going to church, doing the thing, with a little bit of faith, I feel like Alex, you might have enough confidence that maybe there's this mystery of the resurrection. It just may be true. That if you were to start actually practicing the Christian disciplines of church, worship, liturgy, confession, Bible study, that perhaps you walk through that for 6 months, you walk through that for a year, and then you look back in hindsight and you go, man, there's something transformative to this thing. And I still have questions and there's still mysteries, but there's something transformative to this. It is Jesus thing, to Jesus living the life I couldn't live, dying to death I should have died on the cross in my place for my sins, rising on the third day, giving me a new heart, and giving me an ability to usher in heaven and goodness and beauty on this side of eternity. Have you ever explored actually applying that and walking it out, and then saying, well, let me test and see? And how do you like that version of faith, by the way? Because this is a very Jordan Peterson, very pragmatic version of faith.
When you say that what your friend said is true, you either mean it's true that by eating those foods and doing the weight training, you're going to get the physique, or you mean it's true that you're going to like it. Those are two different things, right? And I'm not sure exactly which it was.
I probably will hate it. I'll hate it. Yeah, I hated it at first.
So as in that you'll like it when it's done, like you'll like the life that it leads to.
I like the way it feels after a week of no sugar. I like the way it feels after a month of strength
like
training.
the way you say, like, oh, I'm not sure if I believe my friend, but then I try it. It's like, well, I know for a fact that if you are in a calorie surplus and you weight train, you put on weight. If you're in a calorie detriment, or whatever the word is, deficit, and if you're just in a calorie deficit, forget the weight training, you lose weight. Like, that is just a fact. That's true.
Yeah, but I don't get how he obviously that wasn't the question. You're trying to look for a result, especially if you're overweight and this is causing you to have heart failure or problems with your cardiovascular health. No matter whether or not you like it or not, you need to do it if you're going to survive. And some people just can't have a concept of eating less means you'll gain less weight, essentially. And that's why it's important to figure out which foods have less calories in, so you don't have to worry about still feeling completely hungry after eating. I would love to see your reaction to his video. What video? Corpse says fake it till you make it. Nah. But yeah, I think that's interesting how he said, well, do I like it? Not necessarily. I mean, following Jesus is not going to be easy. Christ doesn't say it's going to be easy, but it's the most fulfilling life. All right, let's continue.
And you don't need to experience it to know that that's true. It's just demonstrable. To know whether you would prefer a certain kind of physique, like that's a totally different kind of thing. And I understand that you're not going to know that until you've actually done it. Unfortunately, I think that like the equivalent of like eating your broccoli and your chicken with religion are things which are sometimes kind of conceptually impossible. So prayer is quite important to a Christian lifestyle. And I think that in many ways, depending on the kind of person you are, prayer can be conceptually impossible if you don't already believe in God, because you can like go through the motions, but a Christian can do that too, and they wouldn't properly be praying because they're not actually talking to God. They're just saying words, right? You need to actually believe in some sense that you're communing with God. And try as I might, I cannot muster that kind of even like temporary trial belief, because I don't. Not actually mostly all
no. But sorry guys,
if it's early first century, no,
sorry actually. What's up, Papa Mac? All right, I need to figure out what time mark was I at here.
But why we should think of the material world.
Why do you yes, but I feel like you bring it up a good amount, and I would say that sounds like people just need to.
You should sort of film it. You should like I had this idea. I was like, I could do it. Need to experience it to know that that's true. It's just demonstrable. To know whether you would prefer a certain kind of physique, Like that's a totally different kind of thing. And I understand
Yep.
that you're not going to know that until you've actually done it.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I think that like the equivalent of like eating your broccoli and your chicken with religion are things which are sometimes kind of conceptually impossible. So prayer is quite important to
Mhm.
a Christian lifestyle. And I think that in many ways, depending on the kind of person you are, prayer can be conceptually impossible if you don't
Mhm.
already believe in God, because you can like go through the motions.
I don't know. I think you could pray all the time and not necessarily know 100% if God is real. Like that's a lot of just calling out, crying out to God. Why is this happening? I think people pray a lot. In a way, more like crying out, trying to figure out. I don't even like broccoli like that. Corp says, do you use science to get the calories or do you have faith in broccoli? You use obviously science. You can see how many calories are in broccoli. I feel like believing is different than knowing. I can believe without knowing 100%. Belief is definitely different than knowing. Yeah.
Mhm.
But a Christian can do that too, and they wouldn't properly be praying because they're not actually talking to God. They're just saying words, right? You need to
Mhm.
actually believe in some sense that you're communing with God. And try as I might, I cannot muster that kind of even like temporary trial belief because I don't
Not
believe that it's true.
not even
So
not
I
even a
think,
God, if you're real, reveal yourself. If you're real, reveal yourself to me. Jesus, if you're real,
oh
reveal yourself to
sure,
me, and I'm open to
yeah,
it.
that's
And then
fine.
you start walking it out. Like you've never that you can't even bring yourself to do that. Is what I'm asking you.
Again, it depends what you mean by walking it out because I have
Going to
been to
church, reading, praying, confession. Like I'm just giving you the
I've been to
basics of the
church
Christian.
and I've read and I've prayed and I've done all of these things to
As a
varying
practice though,
degrees
like
throughout my life.
as a for the next 9.
um, Ruslan is completely. Ruslan and Alex are I think, completely missing each other's ideas. Ruslan's like, if you just walk it out for 90 days, then you're definitely going to see a difference in your life. Like, it's obvious. If you do these disciplines, you're going to see growth in your spiritual life and probably feel closer to God. And then Alex is like, I've done that. I've been to church. And I've heard before that Alex has gone to church, and I think that's amazing. I think he likes going to church or, you know, to services or whatever. I think Orthodox or mostly Orthodox churches, I think. Um, but obviously, there's a difference between just going through the motions and actually doing it because you want to, doing it because you love God, doing it because you want to experience God more, and you want to get to know God more. Bruce says fake it, and Alex says I can't because it's not genuine. I think that's fair.
I'm gonna pretend to
Depends
be
what you mean as
Christian.
a practice, because also, thou shalt not put thy Lord to the test. Like it starts to feel like somebody recommended to me once that you should sort of film it. You should like I had this idea. I was like, I could do a video where I like live as a Christian for like a week or a month or
Uh huh.
something, and just sort of vlog how it affects my life. It
Yeah.
could be interesting.
Yeah.
But I suddenly
I
realized
think 90 days will take.
filming it,
Uh huh.
the moment you're filming it, the moment you're doing it like with this scientific motivation, it kind of
Uh huh.
undermines it because your
Uh huh.
motives are off. I think that you need to come to Christ because you want to and think that
Mhm.
it's the right thing to do, not
Mm.
because you just I think it's very difficult to just entertain things that you can't think are true. You can entertain them in the sense that they might be true, and you say, "Well, God, if you're there, then I hope you're listening to me." But you can't actually think you're like praying to God. And so, something depending on what you mean by prayer, it kind of becomes conceptually impossible. It's possible to go to church,
Uh huh.
but it's not possible to experience communion. I mean, Catholics, for example, wouldn't even like want
Yeah.
you to go up
Sure.
because you're not a Catholic. But even if you were like in some church which allowed you to partake in the memorial, like I'm like, well, I don't believe that this happened. I don't believe that this is doing this. I don't believe like you
Yeah.
can go through the motions,
Uh huh.
but it almost feels actually kind of offensive to do that, because you're like, because you're just doing
We'll
a
give you a
parody.
pass.
Yeah, we'll give you a
You're doing
pass.
the
We'll go through the
outward
motions.
Chris,
There's nothing wrong though with checking it out though. There's nothing wrong with trying to experience God's love. There's nothing wrong with seeking him instead of just being like, well, since I don't believe it in the first place, then I'm not going to even try. I think that's a problem as well. What was I going to say? I was going to say something about what Alex was talking about. I blanked. Sorry.
you
So,
two
so
gives you the
seriously, I
pass.
mean, say that like I probably haven't to the extent that you would feel
Yeah.
content that I've tried my best, but it's
Yeah.
not like I'm just been sitting around twiddling my thumbs all these years. But also the point to bring up is that I hear the same kind of testimony from all kinds of people about all kinds of things. I felt the same way as a vegan. You will never look back. Like, I cannot believe that I was eating meat. Like, this is unbelievable. I'm never going to, like, the rest of my life will be dedicated to this. And then, well, maybe not. I hear Muslims say the same thing. Like, bro, you just got it. Like, you've just got to try it, man. I think
Veganism is kind of like a religion.
to come into masjid, bro, you'd be like, oh man, you don't even know, like, you'd be the greatest Muslim. Like, it's like, okay, man, maybe that's true. Like, maybe that's actually true. And I actually think that if I were to start going to masjid and I started to hang out with Muslim circles and grow out my beard and all this kind of stuff, I'd probably start thinking, yeah, man, like, okay, this is kind of cool. I'm into this, you know, because like the people that you're with and the actions that you participate in just define the person that you are. Show me your friends
Sure.
and I'll show you the man. That's the idea.
Sure.
And so I don't think there's anything special about Christianity in that case. So, given my special interest in Christianity, it makes sense for me to sort of try that in particular. But like in my position as like as a non-believer and a non-resistant non-believer, I should be giving about as much time to any other world religion or ideology.
I feel like you've conceded that Christianity is superior to other religions, though, in some sense. Like just in your explanation for why the resurrection is true, it seems like you know that there is at least a mystery there that might be onto something. And
so
it
kind of depends what you mean.
If it is superior or better or adds more net positive than other religions, and maybe you're not saying this, but like the Christian doesn't experience doubt. The Christian doesn't experience dry patches of their faith. The Christian doesn't have certainty on all these things. Like we're all working out our salvation with fear and trembling.
You mean the Christian does have doubt, right? You mean the Christian does.
Sorry, I misspoke. Thank you. Yeah, we wrestle as well. Like we all wrestle through these things. And what I'm not saying is like check
God, yeah.
We who wrestle with God. What I'm not saying is check your brain out, because I saw Derek from Myth Vision always stirring the pot in here. We're not saying check your brain out and just follow your heart. I'm saying it's and both. I'm saying it's you walk it out, and as I walk it out, the more the faith grows. The more I practice, the more it grows. The more I practice, the more it grows. That is what I was getting to. But if you're like, hey, I have on this level, and I can't bring myself to prayer, I understand, and I would say that sounds like people just need to continue praying for you. You know what I mean? I think people need to continue praying for you, and I genuinely believe that if you wanted Jesus to reveal himself to you and you asked, I think he would. Now I think that would be complicated for you, but maybe it wouldn't. You know, I don't know what that looks like. So this is me.
People are indeed welcome to keep praying for me. I do wish they'd stop putting their hands on me while they do it.
You don't like that part?
That's funny. Yeah, I'm definitely a laying on hands guy. But if they don't want me to, I understand. No, I've had opportunities to pray for people, especially like if homeless people come up to me and they ask for food or something, and I'll go get them food, but I always offer to pray for them. And I prayed for this man once, and I laid my hands on him, and he's like, that prayer meant more than the food that you gave me. And praying personally for someone, like when they hear you pray for them, something really special about that. I don't know if it's just feelings or emotion, but like, or if it's just obviously God working in their life. That's definitely a real thing. And I think when you really seek God, you will find him. But you got to be willing to hear his voice. And I do feel like genuinely Alex O'Connor is seeking God probably more than a lot of even just cultural Christian people. He's doing his due diligence. He's reading the Bible. He's doing a lot of different things more than a lot of just cultural Christians are, which is sad for Christians, but great for Alex. So I'm happy about that. Hello, Pariah. I don't think... Okay, reading some comments. The way... Not everyone. Mainly indoctrinated, but... I usually some personal subjects. The way you have to have faith and trust in God and Jesus to show you the way and the truth. When I was a child, the more I went to church, the less I believed. What church do you go to, Corpse? And there you go, everyone. You obviously... Hello, Sean. Obviously, just because you go to church doesn't mean you're a believer in Jesus or you were indoctrinated either. And that means you're going to grow up to be someone who follows Jesus.
Respect that.
Okay.
That's
Zach
it's
doesn't
just
like
sort
that
of,
either.
I'm with you
it
on
feels
that.
a little. It just feels a little bit awkward. It's sort of like when everyone's saying
Apologies.
happy
Yeah, yeah.
birthday to you,
Apologies.
except it's not even your actual birthday. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Apologies on behalf of all charismatics. Last question for you, and then maybe we'll go to some super chats. Okay, last question for you. Okay, this fascination with the Gospel of Thomas, my response to you with the Gospel of Thomas, I'm not sure if you saw that was actually Wes chimed in and gave a reason for why the Gospel of Thomas is not.
I did see that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like before he blew up. Yeah, I saw that.
Before he blew up. Yeah. And so and by the way, did that it was that in any way connected to you doing the debunking videos? Was because he debunked your your argument for the...
Okay, yeah, I think I just wanted to keep it to that short amount. That's amazing. So I pray that that Alex O'Connor really seeks to know Jesus more and comes to know him. And he needs to experience the love of Jesus. He needs to experience God and a level that will completely transform his life, something that's undeniable. So we need to be praying that Alex actually experience the love of Jesus, because obviously he knows every intellectual side to everything, and that's not winning him over. I think one thing that really helps is him or anyone through amazing Christian example can be like, wow, only someone who follows Jesus could do that, or someone else who completely got transformed. What do you guys think in the chat? All right. Matthew 28 through 29 says, "Then Jesus said, 'Come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart. You will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light.'" Amen. So, guys, I encourage you to go to Jesus today. You can see that. You can cast all of your cares on him, for he cares for you. He even cares for the sparrows that fall on the floor. I know Alex loves and cares so much for animals and suffering. And the Bible even talks so much about the care for even the animals, even the birds that fall on the floor. So, guys, I encourage you to go to Jesus today. Know that he loves you and he's longing to have a relationship with you. It will be the best decision you can ever make. In the description below, you will be able to click a link to help you decide to follow Jesus for the first time. Guys, it will be the best decision you could ever make. I kind of walk you right through just some simple stuff. So, yeah. What are your guys' thoughts? Crazy stuff. Christ works. Woo, we got lots of comments going on here, so can't even keep up with you guys. How's everyone's day going so far? Okay. Okay, I'm pulling up what I need to, the timestamp for this. 28. Okay. All right. So Tom Holland and John Anderson talk about the importance of the cross, and it may shock you. So let's get right into it. And I have a Bible verse that will tie all of this together. Let's go.
Most radical. Right. Well, can we backtrack a moment to the cross? And you talked about it symbolized a whole lot of things that were very radical. I agree with that. I mean, I actually think Christianity is astonishingly radical. And it's always amused me that a lot of people say, oh, Christians are so conservative. Actually, what they believe in is radical beyond belief.
Corpse, where did you see snow? I saw it snowed in Florida. It didn't snow in Orlando, but it snowed. Not one Christian can name one contemporary source mentioned anyone called Jesus. Josephus.
And
Atticus mentioned Christians.
Most radical is, in fact, that aspect of the image of the cross, particularly when it's empty, there's no body on it. There's this idea, that Christians think history matters, and they actually believe that God in human form not only died on that cross, but he left it and rose again.
Nice.
And the polling I've seen in Australia is quite amazing, that even to this day, and Australia is a very secular country, 40% of Australians
South Carolina, nice, cool.
think in some form or another the resurrection happened. Not many people actually say they don't think it happened, and
hello, Ronnie.
if you're undecided.
But you see, I don't think you need to believe in the resurrection or even to believe that Jesus existed to buy into some pretty fundamental values that derive from the story that Jesus suffered death on the cross and then rose in triumph on the third day. Because I think we've seen over the past 2 years, the idea that Black Lives Matter. Why do Black Lives Matter? Because I would suggest historically in the United States and elsewhere as well, Black people have suffered injustice. They have been the last, and white people have been the first, and that is seen as being inherently wrong. But why should it be inherently wrong? I mean, that's the question. So that's the question. Yeah. Why should it be inherently wrong? And in a sense, And you can see this right the way from Voltaire, this great French enemy of as he called it, he termed it Catholic superstition, l'infâme, in the 18th century. He picks up on people who have suffered injustice at the hands of the Catholic Church, as he sees it, and campaigns for justice on their behalf. Why is he doing that? Because I would suggest he's been brought up in a culture where the image of someone who has suffered an unjust death and triumphed over his enemies is part of what he kind of breathes in. And I would say that that's still clearly the case today, because the way in which the death of George Floyd acted like a kind of touch paper for all kinds of campaigns and ideals and principles kind of blazed across the Western world, although I think only the Western world, tellingly. So Voltaire adopts the cause of, for instance, a Protestant who is treated very badly because he's a Protestant in a Catholic country, France, gets broken to death on the wheel, terrifying kind of image of torture. This infuriates and angers and upsets Voltaire, and he campaigns for justice, and he sees it as kind of part of his campaign against the iniquities of the Catholic Church. But the truth is that he is able to win. He gets a pardon, posthumous pardon, for this guy who's been broken on the wheel, because ultimately he is appealing to people who can understand, because they're Christians, that there is a deep injustice in someone innocent being tortured to death. It goes to the kind of the very heart of Christian and Catholic identity. And I think that, we can see this kind of trend, the way in which the power of the victim tortured to death by an oppressive power still has this ability to convulse nations. So if we look at, what happened in the summer of 2020 with the death of George Floyd, that had a kind of very similar animating power, because people looked at that and said, well, there is someone, he couldn't breathe, he was being he suffered death horribly and hideously. But why should it have had that power? Why should it have that power? Why did it kind of generate people to go almost on pilgrimages to take the knee?
Oh, I'm sorry. Josephus was born in 37 AD, so 4 years after they think Jesus was alive. Wow, that's so terrible. And you have to, I'm sorry, but you have to admit that some of the Gospels were written by people who would have known Jesus. 1 Corinthians was probably the earliest writings. And Paul talked to people who would have experienced Jesus. There's no other religion has as many manuscripts, or any other people during that time have any manuscripts compared to what Christianity has. It's not even close.
Fill great civic centers, not just in the United States, but across the Western world. I would argue that, there's nothing kind of culturally given about this. It's reflective of highly contingent trends that are so deep and ancient that ultimately they go back 2,000 years to that very, very primal image of a man tortured to death by an oppressive state apparatus, Jesus on the cross.
So, in a sense, what I hear you saying is that, strangely enough, when we cry out against injustice, and it often comes from people who now think Christianity is not just not true, it's bad. Mm-hmm. We've got to break free of our moorings, and won't be a good society until we get rid of Christianity. What you're actually saying is we're making those judgments through a profoundly Christian lens. We're not even aware of it.
I think it's really, really difficult to escape that Christian lens. And to kind of go back to...
Should we try and escape it?
Well, I mean, I think that is kind of the question that Nietzsche poses, is what would a society look like that genuinely repudiated Christian teaching? And I think that in a way, to build a civilization on Christian teaching is a bit like building San Francisco on the San Andreas Fault. there are going to be tremors and occasionally big ones, at fairly regular intervals. And the reason for that, again, is kind of hardwired into the Christian story, because if the last must become first, and this is the kind of the great Christian narrative that the power of Caesar will be replaced by the power of Christ. That obviously sets in train all kinds of revolutionary movements. But the problem with that is that revolutionary movements bring to power new elites. So if you look at the 11th...
That's crazy. I love how he talks about Christ replaces Caesar, the rulers. Amen.
Century, where there is this kind of great convulsive process of revolution that brings to power bishops and cardinals and priests and monks who see themselves as trampling into dust the claim of Caesars and kings to have a right to arbitrate in the dimension of the supernatural. And they kind of humble kings, and they force them to accept the primacy ultimately of the papacy. So medieval Europe is Europe's first experience of a revolutionary society. That creates its own elite, and it kind of in the long run makes inevitable a revolution against that elite, which we call the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation. And the Reformation in turn throws up new elites, and so it goes on. And this is a constant churn, a constant process. Christian society is constantly going through reformation, reformatio, the remaking of the world, the ambition to pull down those who have an unjust claim on power, to cleanse society, to purify it, to elevate those who have been trampled down. And that seems to me a process that is absolutely going on now. Now, one of the paradoxes of this process, particularly, since the French Revolution, really, is that Christianity itself...
Jake, do you believe in Alexander the Great? That would be the real question. Do you believe that a person actually existed whose name was Alexander the Great?
Has come to be seen as being part of this kind of oppressive structure, but that doesn't alter the fact that Christianity is condemned by, say, the French Revolution or by revolutionaries in the 60s or whatever for deeply, deeply Christian reasons.
Yeah, that's something very powerful for people to think through. To go back to your idea that, in a sense, we're repulsed by Nazism to the degree that it confirms, if you like, a Christian view that we oughtn't to go there. That's probably not well put. But it seems to me to be very important, because what the Nazi movement highlighted was that in reality there are no inalienable rights if you do away with God, in terms of other human beings having, being worthy of respect. And
well,
what have you. I mean, they really did believe in the survival of the fittest, and it's such an ugly doctrine.
Yeah, absolutely.
That it repulses us, and we say we can't go there.
Well, the Nazis repudiated two of the fundamental values that Christianity has always enshrined, and one of them you just touched on, the idea that the survival of the fittest, that the idea that to be strong is to be good. It's kind of fairly fun.
No, we don't. The oldest manuscript for Alexander the Great was literally 300 years after he was even alive. There's more evidence for Jesus than Alexander the Great.
Mental idea, say for the Greeks. I mean, they kind of conflated, the good beauty and a goodness and strength. This it was to be a good person. But of course, the other fundamental Christian ideal that the Nazis repudiate is the idea that, as Paul put it, there is no Jew or Greek. And that in turn is a kind of refinement of the teaching of Genesis, that God creates man and woman in his image. And therefore, if men and women are created in the image of God, every human being has an inherent dignity. And this is an idea that over the course of the Middle Ages kind of feeds into the idea that human beings have rights, that if, you know, and this is something that that churchmen and lawyers in the 12th century start to extrapolate from the gospel teachings. If Christ is saying to the wealthy, you have a duty to feed the hungry and to clothe those who have no clothes and to give shelter to those who are homeless, then it follows that the hungry have a right to food, and those without clothes have a right to clothes, and those who don't have a home have a right to a home. And so you start to get the idea that human beings have inherent rights. And these are ideas that secularized feed into the American Revolution, into the French Revolution, into United Nations. It's a very, very profound idea that today, for lots of people who believe in human rights, they tend to kind of assume that they are immanent. But in the long run, you know, when you look at it in the kind of historical perspective, to believe in human rights requires just as much a leap of faith as believing that the Lord Jesus Christ rose on the third day and ascended into heaven. I mean, these are theological precepts, theological ideas that have been bred specifically of Christian history. And the genius of the West has been to kind of package them and market them as though somehow they've been, you know, removed from the Christian context that gave them birth. Yeah. And I think that one of the things...
So good. Christianity is a thing that really moved our society forward. It was a thing that really moved a culture where people have value. There's no honor killings. There's no people fighting for a sport to death anymore. Christians are the ones who gave women value. Christians were the ones who finally said, no, babies have value. They completely changed the course of history.
That we're seeing, seen over the past few decades, really since the 21st century, is that as Western power and influence retreats, so more and more of the world is kind of basically saying, well, these ideas, these ideals are, these are culturally contingent. These are your ideas. They're not our ideas. And I think that this is unsettling for people in the West precisely because we have the kind of, the shadow of the Nazis hangs over us, because the Nazis absolutely did think against Paul that Jews and Greeks were completely separate. And we know where that led. And part of the horror of the Holocaust, the kind of the horror and the most grotesque irony in the history of Christendom is that Hitler saw Paul, St. Paul, who said there is no Jew or Greek, as the embodiment of a kind of pernicious a Jewish cosmopolitanism that he saw as having destroyed Greece and Rome. He thought this idea that there is no Jew or Greek, that there is no slave or free, that there is no man or woman, had corrupted classical civilization and destroyed it.
So your thinking behind that is Hitler thought that the Jews were subhuman, they were not human. And somehow they climbed under the idea.
He saw them as the most dangerous enemy of the strong. That Paul is preaching Christ crucified. He's preaching this dead man on a cross. He's preaching this universalism, this cosmopolitanism, and this destroys the Roman Empire. And so Hitler thinks that if his Reich is going to last 1,000 years and not be brought down by a creeping Jewish cosmopolitanism, then he has to get rid of the Jews. But there's a case for saying that he targets the Jews for genocide because he blames them for Christianity, which, considering the fact that he draws on obviously all kinds of kind of very venerable Christian, anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish propaganda, I mean, it's just the kind of the most hideous irony and paradox.
Yeah, that's sad and crazy. But that is an idea of a survival of the fittest. That is an idea of people thinking one person is stronger than the other, therefore we have the right to push them down, which is completely contradictory to the Bible. So crazy. Wild and crazy. The chat is going crazy. I can't even keep up with half the things people are saying. Genesis 9:6 says, if anyone takes a human life, that person's life will also be taken by human hands. For God made human beings in his own image. So it's clear, anyone who tries to justify using the Bible or anything else to condemn or to take a life or to treat someone any less than, they're wrong. God doesn't command it. God doesn't say that you're able to own another person in that way. So, guys, I encourage you to seek Jesus and look to know him more because he does love you. He is longing to have a relationship with you. Any skeptic, any person who doubts or hates or condemns or does whatever they think necessary, God still loves you. He still wants to have a relationship with you no matter what. Because he is God. And he forgives sins. You guys are great. I love you all. I love you all so much. All right. What does the data reveal to us about the resurrection of Jesus? So let's get right into the video. Shout out to Gary Hubermas and so many others. Let's get into it.
My minimal facts argument. He said that the Jesus. All right.
So you really have written the book on the
Oh,
resurrection.
you talking about what Bob Stewart said today?
No, I'm not giving you grief.
I had a dialogue with a guy today, and he was critical of my minimal facts argument. He said at the end of his, he's a friend, but at the end of the message, he said, oh, and by the way, the book should be a case for the resurrection of Jesus, not the case.
Not
You
the
kept
case.
saying the
Yeah.
case.
Well, I'm giving you-
you were in there today. No, you weren't.
No, I wasn't. I was up here. But I'm giving you credit because you really have written the book that's most well known and most cited as
All
far as
right.
what I've come across. And I think it's incredibly thorough, despite what your friends tell you. So I'm thrilled to have you here with us to talk a little bit about it. But can you just start by sharing some of your own story and background, and then maybe even what led you to even do your research and write specifically on this topic, on the resurrection?
Well, I was mentioning that I do a lot of interviews, and so people call because they connect some of my dots together. Like I'm either doing resurrection or near-death experiences, or also about life after death, or doubt, of which the resurrection helps. So, it's all tied
Yes.
together. And people assume on talk shows or whatnot, they'll say, no, well, now tell us. Did you get into this because, let me guess, you're altruistic and you thought you were going to really help people and you wanted to solve their problems? And no. Okay, what happened? Well, I was trying to solve my problems.
Yeah.
So I became a Christian. I was raised in a German Baptist church, but I had pretty severe doubts. And I went through a period of 10 years of doubts, and then in the second 10 years, off and on, sporadic. And I realized pretty early on that if Jesus were raised from the dead, it could answer all my questions, because you'd have to say, well, what happened to him? Well, why was he raised? Why would the Father have done it? There's many other founders of major world religions. Nobody else was raised from the dead. Why him? What was God trying to tell us by raising him and not Moses or not somebody else? And so I thought, okay, good. I didn't say that I'm going to give the rest of my life, but it became that. But I thought, okay, here's the only problem. I don't know if it happened or not. But if it did, I can see this thing, it's the battery at the beginning that runs the whole thing.
Agreed, yeah.
It runs a power station. So let's see if the battery works in this. So I started studying the resurrection.
Very cool.
And that's how it was. My questions, I was very selfish. Well, see, when I say very selfish, when I was growing up in the church, almost nobody was asking apologetic questions. So it's not like everybody else was dying and I wouldn't hold my hand out and save the person who's going down. It just, nobody was going down that I know of. In fact, my pastor even told me, you shouldn't really study this area. There's too much stuff. You're reading the critics. Why don't you just believe the Bible? So because with all due respect, I'm not like you.
Yeah.
I can't just believe. I mean, I can just believe when I say I do, but I want to know what the basis is, what the foundation is.
Yeah. I think for so many people who've grown up in the church, they've probably had a similar experience where they it's not even someone else's question, it's their own.
Sure.
And then when they verbalize it, the response that they get, it puts them back on their heels like, whoa, I've done something wrong here. And so I'm thankful that people who see this later, that they can go, hang on, I'm in good company. And you said for a decade,
Jake, you need to learn how to read in context. And first of all, Paul had another vision later on where Jesus appeared to him. It doesn't matter if he literally saw him or heard his voice. What he was saying is Jesus came to him. It's obvious.
through serious doubt, and then even ongoing beyond that.
It is. It was. Yeah. But by God's grace, I don't know how long time, decades, I've had no more doubts. By the way, I can share one principle. You know why I don't have any doubts anymore? Because I realized some time ago that if Jesus is the Son of God who died on the cross for our sins, is raised from the dead, whoever says yes to him has eternal life, I don't have to answer any other questions. I mean, there are other questions I'd like to answer. What about Genesis? What about the so-called genocide passage in the Old Testament? There's some tough passages. How come I can't reconcile this verse with this verse or this event with this event? To which I think I'm justified now, knowing the resurrection. I'm justified in saying, I really don't know. And someday I can study that. But it's not my job to answer your question, because unless the resurrection is proven, Christianity is true. If Christianity is true, I have eternity to check out the other things. So I'll ask Moses about creation. I'll ask Joshua about the conquest of Canaan.
I like it.
Ask Jesus why he never told us when he's coming back. Well, he did tell us that. He told us he didn't know.
Yeah.
But even that's a puzzle. Why don't you know? Okay, well, I can find out later why I didn't know.
Yes.
So I'm not worried. If there's a resurrection, the rest is solid.
Agreed. It is the linchpin. Okay, so there's so many things I could ask you about the resurrection, but I'd love to just kind of hone in on one thing, and that would be just asking you about Jesus as a historical character, even. Because when I look at so many of my peers, they're the younger people who are not just in the church, but even outside of it, when I start to engage with them and start to talk specifically about the resurrection, a lot of times people's initial response to me is just, well, I don't even know that Jesus existed, so why would you argue with me that he rose from the dead? And they would start there. And it's not just, I think, the individual on the street, but I even look at its atheist publications. I wanted just to give a quote and then let you respond that I pulled from an atheist website. They said this. They said, as for extra-biblical historicity of Jesus, there is absolutely no reliable contemporary evidence that he ever even existed. He made no impression on any historian of the first century. If Jesus existed, or if the spectacular events in the Gospels really happened, they would have been noted by many writers, which I'm sure you'd agree.
Well, guess what? There are sources.
There we go.
Now, one of them I talked about today, and that's the creedal sources from the first 10 years. You go, well, that's because you're a stinking Christian. You got Scripture, and you accept it because your Scripture says so. Really? How come the skeptic? I'm working on a chapter right now on the creedal sources for this big, long magnum opus I'm doing, the resurrection. 3 times in the chapter, I paused to list only skeptics who agree with this material. I don't remember the first 2 lists, but the last time I made a list, I had a bibliographical list of 25 skeptics who agree with this material, not Christians. So someone is just talk off the top of their head. They don't know what scholarship is saying. I'll give you one example. Marcus Borg, co-founder of the Jesus Seminar, Marcus Borg said about another subject besides resurrection. He said, you may not think miracles happen, and you may not think Jesus did miracles. He said, but on historical grounds, it is virtually indisputable to deny that Jesus was a miracle worker and an exorcist. That's pretty close to a quote.
Yeah, no kidding.
He
Wow,
says
that's impressive.
Wow, that's amazing. And anyone who says, oh, you can't trust Matthew or John or Paul, those people were alive when Jesus was alive. You can't trust Luke because he wasn't around when Jesus was around, but he's still alive, and he interviewed eyewitnesses. You guys do know that the Bible wasn't always the Bible. It was a lot of different manuscripts that were put together later on. Separately.
Indisputable. He was a Jesus Seminar, remember? So that's just worded in such a way as to think everybody has an excuse to get on board. And it's just not what the critics are saying.
And when I've read your book, and when I read it, I noticed you pull people from within a century or a century and a half of Jesus, so many people that you cite and give information about, because the argument is from some people that we don't even know from any of his contemporaries that he was around, or anyone even within 100 years. This is folklore that comes later, and you seem to do a great job.
Are you willing to say who wrote that quote?
I am. They are the godless geeks.
It's what?
The godless geeks.
All right. You know what I was going to say before you said that? I said there's a couple exceptions to what I'm going to say, but my guess is whoever wrote that were not scholars.
No, they're not. They're tech guys in Silicon Valley.
That's great. So they're scholars on tech, not scholars on Jesus. Therefore, they shouldn't be the ones that we should be asking. They don't ask me for what my computer does, and I don't ask them for historical stuff.
And the common person on the street who's struggling through this going, I don't even know that he's a historical character. I think your book can provide quite a background. And I'm sure there are other things. Are there other places you would point them outside of your book about the resurrection that would help them?
Probably the best book in print on evidence is my co-author's book, Michael Lacona's book, The Resurrection of Jesus, A New Historiographical Perspective, 750 pages.
Oh my.
Okay, it's absolutely mind-blowing to me that people will deny the existence of God. People will deny the existence of God, to me, are literally no different than flat earthers. The evidence is there, but they're just going to constantly deny it because they have their own agenda and want to do their own thing. And essentially, they're just haters because of whatever things that have gone into their mind. They're denying the existence of Jesus, if that's what I said. If hopefully I didn't misspeak. Like as a person, not saying them not denying that Jesus was God or whatever. You can go to space, but you also can go to the evidence of Jesus.
Very
Yeah,
impressive.
that means there's a little bit of evidence.
Yeah. Okay, so one more question to ask you about the resurrection.
Sure.
When you're hearing the mantra of people that's being repeated again and again, what's the main objection that you typically hear, whether on a scholarly level or a street level? What if there's a voice that seems to echo and you hear the same thing again and again, what is that? What's people's main objection?
Critics
question?
now, scholars, I don't care if they're atheists, scholars have almost given up picking specific naturalistic theories. Here's naturalistic theory. Jesus wasn't raised from the dead. What really happened was fill in the blank. They've pretty much stopped doing that. I just did a lecture today, and here's the only question I got. But you're cherry picking because you're talking about data, and the resurrection happened in a supernatural world. And
Yeah, sorry. I meant to say Jesus. Yeah. Like the existence of a Jesus as a historical person. That's what I was saying.
I don't know if another world exists. Here's my response. Time out. Have you ever heard about near-death experiences? That's another world. According to the latest medical book that's come out on this, on near-death experiences, up to 30 million people in North America and Europe alone claim to have had near-death experiences. Oh, well, you know, people lie. People misremember. People dream. People hallucinate. Okay, 30 million. How many do we have left when you're done with your investigation? Just a mere million? I mean, I tell people, if that's the conclusion, that means 1 million people have been to Middle Earth. A million people have been in Narnia. 1 million people, say it secularly, have been down the yellow brick road, marching toward the Emerald City. You know, and they all want to make it. And 1 million of them have been there. And some of them, there's incredible evidence that what they saw here, while their brains and hearts.
That's such a great point, Ronnie. There's so many things that are actually good for slaves in the Bible. Exodus 21:26-27. A slave injured by their master is to be freed. Deuteronomy 24:7. Any slave from any nation has to be given refuge and not returned to their master. There's so many things. And who's the ones who started the Christianity religion? What was the most demographic, the largest demographic for Christianity in the beginning was slaves and women, the outcast. If they believed that God thought that slavery was good, you think they would really, really believe in Jesus and follow Jesus?
Working. They report data that can be verified dogmatically by regular research, but they were out at the time but didn't come back till after the event was over. So if there's an afterlife, and by the way, it is another world. I said Narnia, Middle Earth, because here's the latest. My student, an Indian student of mine, he's got a master's degree in philosophy from an Indian university. He speaks excellent English, you just can't understand him. And he's a funny guy. His name is Raj. Well, his nickname's Raj. Raj fell out of a tree when he was 14 years old, plummeted 25 feet to the ground and landed on top of his head. Wow. Oh. His mother came out and started screaming and going, talk to me, talk to me, talk to me. And he's up there. I said, you were in the tree branch, weren't you? I mean, he was he was up in heaven. But he said, he was up in the tree. And he said, Mom, stop it. Stop it. I don't like to see you cry. Mom, I'm fine. He said, Mom never looked up at me once and went, phew, I'm so glad you're okay. She kept screaming. She never heard him. So he was in another whole world. You go, well, how do you know he was in that world? He repeated everything his mom said. And when they came to, he said, Mom, why were you saying that? Well, because I thought I lost you. I understand, but I was watching the whole thing. And they're far more evidential than that. One woman reported a 12-digit number that she saw up above her head while she was up above her body. And when she came to, she said to the nurse, get a pencil out, write these 12 digits down. How did she get 12 digits? What are the chances she got 12 digits right in order? And I know a guy who, this age of magic fingers, he found her on the internet, the nurse. And she said, I copied down those 12 numbers. Another nurse in the room, we heard the 12 numbers. And she said, I want to tell you something. She said it was the most important thing that ever happened to me in my life. Why? Because I think she realized it was more than this world and there was hope. You can just kind of roll all that stuff into one. I don't know if she became a Christian. I don't know what. But what I mean is, the woman couldn't tell anybody the number while she was up there. Raj couldn't say, Mom, stop crying. They were in another world. And there's data for this stuff. So if they go, yeah, well, you don't know if that happened in another world. I'll say, well, you explain the NDEs. And I'm going to tell you, they can't explain them. There are over 300 evidential cases now. Very heavy
near-death
evidential
experiences.
cases. Yeah, very heavy data.
Gotcha. Okay, so then on a street level, individuals, what do you hear as the common objection to the resurrection? Just the typical guy, it's me sitting down in a coffee shop going, hang on,
Stupid
what do you
people
do?
believe in miracles. You guys are wacko. I don't know why you're doing this to yourself. It's the wish to believe. And they don't even stop to think that theirs is the wish not to believe. They don't even stop to think that the knife cuts both ways.
Gotcha.
So if you have a will to believe, they have a will not to believe. That's zero. That's a wash. Now, what are the data for this event? What's it because you want to believe? Stop it. You don't want to believe. Now, what are the data? They generally don't want to talk to you about the data.
Gotcha.
Generally.
It's very good. Okay, well, please tell us, where can people find you online, where they can find some of your
Well,
resources?
the book you mentioned, it is a good book because it's written on a lay level. So it's
Yeah. At the end of the day, people have their own preconceived notions of what happened, and they don't want to even look at the evidence or the evidence that points in their face. They say it's a lie because they're like, how in the world could any of this be true? Because I only believe in the material and the physical, not the supernatural or not the spiritual. And it's difficult. Even though there's so much evidence, and you have to realize there's things that happen that we cannot explain. There's supernatural things that happen that we cannot explain. So, absolutely wild stuff. Love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. God is good, and I'm so thankful that I can have peace to know that God is in control, even if there's crazy things. Even if crazy things happen to me, I could still have peace and joy. Gordon, I think there is more evidence than what you'd like to think. There are supernatural things from current God claims that can't be explained either. Okay, but just let's take out the fact of Christianity and just, you have to, if you're just a complete atheist, I don't know what you believe in or not, but let's just say in general an atheist, they can't believe in any supernatural things going on because it's only the material and the physical. So therefore, you at least have to be agnostic to think that nothing in the world happens. Okay, fair. All right. Jaden says, thank you for the super chat. I was wondering if you've seen videos or have run into the Hebrew Israelites. Yes, believe in works-based salvation. It's not just works-based salvation. You have to be black to be saved. If you're white, you're screwed. I have, and they were the most racist people I've come into. They said I had to bow down to them and kiss their feet. It's very interesting. It was the first time I ever encountered a black Hebrew Israelites, and it was crazy stuff. and they use very, very interesting verses out of context. Yep, but you're more agnostic. Fair enough. Fair enough, Gordon. Like when I talk to Dr. James Tour, he's like, anyone who's intellectually honest, when you really think about it, you have to be more agnostic, because if you're an atheist, you have to literally, to say there is no God, you can't prove that as well. So I guess it's fair for you. I hope you come to know Jesus, and I'm glad that you guys are watching. But yeah, it's very difficult to have a conversation with a Black Hebrew Israelite, because they're just going to yell and take verses out of context. They think like a random verse that, sorry, meant Revelations 9:6. What do you think about the verse Revelations 9:6? What does it say? Yeah, I got you got to be prepared, because they're gonna have one guy talking, and then they're gonna have another guy reading these verses that they have set up, and just say, boom, get roasted. and they don't let you talk either, so it becomes a yelling match if you want to get anything. Indeed, atheists make about as much sense as religion. I mean, that's intellectually honest, I would say, but I love all the people on today. It's been fun. But I have to get going here soon. All right, I'm going to pray for you all and let you guys go. I'm going to have notes page ready next time. Yeah, you have to. Why don't you want to say it? I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, Frank Turk. Yep. All they do is talk over you anyway. I know. Revelations 9:6. In those days, people will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them. Okay, what do you want me to say? Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Right time to go see what Trump got up to today. Okay. Okay, I'll pray for you, Papa Mac. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for everyone watching this today. I pray that they will know that they're loved by you, God. And I pray for the people who have doubts and are not sure if you are the real God. And they're not sure if Jesus really did exist. They're not sure if Jesus really did die on the cross for their sins and then rose again in 3 days. I pray that they will experience you and help them to know that you love them so much and you care for them. You even care for the sparrows. God, I pray for Papa Mac as he has a revival meeting. I pray that you will just work in his life and speak through him and the people that he encounters and meets. I pray that everything will just go well and that people will come to know you more and experience your love. Work in people's lives and help them come to know you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys. Love you all. Lord bless Trump. help him to do your will. Amen. All right. God bless you guys. Have an amazing day. Peace.